When Andria Johnson stood before an audience at 42 and released words that cut through years of silence, the gospel world was shaken to its core. Her revelation about Jonathan McReynolds was not just another passing confession. It was the ignition of a firestorm that pulled hidden tensions, allegations, and private disputes into the public square. The ripple effect was immediate and unstoppable, traveling from church pews to social media feeds, from local gospel blogs to national media outlets, leaving no corner of the faith community untouched. It was in those first few hours after her statement that the collective conversation began to fracture, supporters rushing to stand with her, defenders rallying around Jonathan, and countless others demanding clarity, accountability, and honesty. Like, comment and subscribe to the channel as we walk carefully through this complex story, unpacking its layers with the detail it deserves. Because what unfolded here was more than a clash of personalities. It was a test of faith, trust, and the evolving expectations of a watching audience. Andria Johnson's decision to speak at 42 carried symbolic weight. For over a decade, she had lived under the intense glare of public attention, known both for her powerhouse voice and her tumultuous journey through the gospel industry. Silence, in many ways, had been her shield. Controversies in the past had cost her dearly, and she had learned the price of being too open in an environment that often demanded perfection. Yet this moment was different. Johnson's revelation broke through the guardedness she had built, as though she had reached a point in her life where carrying certain truths privately was no longer possible. The gospel industry has a history of silencing uncomfortable narratives, preferring polished testimonies over raw confessions, but Johnson's voice broke the pattern. She carried the weight of personal cost, but also the determination of someone who believed that her story, however uncomfortable, needed to be told. When she finally spoke, her tone was not of bitterness, but of weary resolve, shaped by years of inner conflict and the courage that comes only with age and perspective. At the center of her disclosure were pointed accusations directed at Jonathan McReynolds. For years, McReynolds had cultivated an image of humility, talent, and faith-driven artistry, becoming one of gospel's most celebrated young voices. His career trajectory appeared nearly spotless. Albums praised for lyrical depth, appearances on major platforms, and endorsements from respected church leaders. Against that backdrop, Johnson's words landed with a force of contradiction. She spoke not just of personal friction, but of hidden tensions that painted a very different picture of the artist many fans believed they knew. Her accusations described professional disputes, ministry conflicts, and moments where his private behavior did not align with his carefully managed public persona. Such revelations cut deep because they collided with the very essence of gospel music's promise, that those who sing about grace, truth, and redemption should embody those values both on and off stage. By raising these points, Johnson did more than challenge McReynolds. She challenged the community's willingness to see beyond polished performances and confront the flawed humanity of its leaders. The shock of her revelation was compounded by the fact that speculation had lingered for years. Within gospel circles, whispers of friction between Johnson and McReynolds had been part of the background noise, never loud enough to dominate headlines, but persistent enough to surface during industry conversations. Fans had occasionally noticed moments of tension during collaborations or subtle absences from joint projects that once seemed promising. Social media, that ever-watchful amplifier of hidden narratives, had long circulated theories about creative differences, clashing personalities, and unspoken conflicts. For Johnson to finally confirm that those suspicions were not mere imagination, but reflections of real, unresolved issues validated the instincts of many and shattered the hopes of those who wanted to believe the rumors were unfounded. The gospel community, already accustomed to grappling with the tension between artistry and ministry, suddenly found itself confronting the truth that even its most promising partnerships were vulnerable to the same fractures that afflict secular industries. As Johnson elaborated on the nature of their conflicts, she made it clear that the disputes were not trivial. These were not simple artistic disagreements over lyrics or production choices. They were deeper questions of ministry philosophy, creative integrity, and personal trust. Johnson described how creative partnerships became strained under the weight of differing visions, with her prioritizing raw honesty and spiritual transparency, while McReynolds often leaned toward polished presentation and broad appeal. Such clashes were not merely artistic. They touched on the core question of what gospel music is meant to represent. Should it be a reflection of lived struggles with all their messiness, or a polished proclamation that comforts audiences and reassures them of stability. For Johnson, the inability to reconcile those differences eroded trust, leaving collaborations soured and friendships strained. These disagreements became symbolic of a larger divide within the gospel world, one that pits authenticity against image, honesty against branding, and vulnerability against the pressures of professionalism. Beyond creative disputes, Johnson leveled more personal allegations, claims that McReynolds' private conduct diverged sharply from his public image. In a genre where personal integrity is often as scrutinized as musical talent, such allegations cut to the heart of credibility. Johnson did not present her story as an attempt to destroy a career, but as an unflinching acknowledgement of realities she felt compelled to share. Whether the allegations concerned personal relationships, behind-the-scenes behavior, or interpersonal dealings, the underlying theme was the same. The Jonathan McReynolds adored by fans and celebrated by industry leaders was not always a Jonathan she knew personally. The power of her words came not from sensationalism, but from their alignment with the broader struggle the gospel industry faces, the danger of constructing public saints while ignoring private flaws. This is a struggle as old as the church itself, where the tension between reputation and reality has led to both scandals and reformations across centuries. Social media served as the accelerant that transformed Johnson's revelation into a full-blown controversy. Within minutes of her statement, hashtags spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, amplifying every detail, dissecting every nuance. Supporters of Johnson praise her bravery, framing her as a truth-teller in a culture that too often punishes those who speak out. Defenders of McReynolds, on the other hand, rallied around him, emphasizing his years of ministry, his consistent message, and the possibility that Johnson's perspective was colored by personal grievances. Analysts and commentators quickly joined in, offering breakdowns of industry dynamics, historical parallels, and the broader implications for gospel leadership. The sheer volume of responses turned the controversy into more than just a celebrity spat. It became a referendum on the values of the gospel community itself. Social media's immediacy meant that the story could not be contained or softened. It was debated, shared, and scrutinized in real time by millions, making silence an impossible option for either party involved. The speed with which the controversy jumped from social media to mainstream outlets revealed the cultural weight of gospel music beyond its traditional audience. Gospel blogs covered every detail. Christian radio hosts debated the matter on air, and within days, national media outlets picked up the story, framing it within larger conversations about accountability in religious spaces. This amplification was not accidental. It reflected a growing cultural appetite for stories that expose the humanity of public figures once seen as untouchable. Johnson's revelation thus became part of a broader media trend in which religious leaders, once shielded by reverence, are now held to public standards of transparency similar to those faced by politicians, entertainers, and business leaders. The national attention also forced church leaders, artists, and fans alike to grapple with questions they might otherwise have ignored, demonstrating how personal revelations can snowball into cultural reckonings with lasting impact. Industry insiders, meanwhile, were quick to note the practical consequences of the controversy. Gospel music thrives on collaborations, joint tours, and shared ministry events, many of which depend on perceived unity and credibility of the artists involved. With the rift between Johnson and McReynolds now public, the possibility of future collaborations became uncertain. Promoters and event organizers faced difficult questions about audience reactions, potential boycotts, and the reputational risks of featuring either artist in the same lineup. Behind closed doors, managers and industry stakeholders debated whether the controversy would cool quickly or leave lasting scars. For a genre already fighting to maintain relevance in an evolving music landscape, the prospect of losing harmony among its leading voices was troubling. The incident served as a reminder that gospel music, while rooted in faith, is still an industry shaped by the same economic pressures, audience dynamics, and branding considerations as any other corner of entertainment. In the face of mounting pressure, both Johnson and McReynolds issued responses that emphasized faith, forgiveness, and a commitment to private resolution. Johnson reiterated that her aim was not destruction but honesty, framing her revelation as part of her own healing journey. McReynolds, for his part, leaned on themes of grace and understanding, suggesting that the matter was more complex than what could be captured in headlines or online debates. Their measured tone stood in stark contrast to the explosive reactions online, reflecting perhaps a shared awareness of the damage unchecked escalation could cause. Yet even in their attempts to de-escalate, the tension remained unresolved, lingering like an open wound in the gospel community. Their responses, while calming in tone, did little to erase the memory of what had been said, leaving fans and observers to wrestle with the dual realities of forgiveness and accountability. What emerged from this controversy was not simply a debate about two artists, but a broader conversation on transparency, accountability, and vulnerability in ministry. For too long, many church communities have struggled with a culture of silence, where leaders are celebrated for their public gifts, but shielded from scrutiny when private actions fall short. Johnson's revelation, whether fully accepted or not, opened the door for many to ask whether gospel leaders should be more transparent, whether accountability systems should be strengthened, and whether the community should place less emphasis on image and more on authentic growth. This is not a new conversation. Scandals in church leadership, both historical and recent, have repeatedly underscored the need for reform, but the Johnson-McReynolds episode added a fresh urgency. By situating the debate within the world of music, where artistry meets ministry, it reminded the community that transparency is not a threat, but a necessary foundation for trust. The lessons of this moment are as complex as they are urgent. Transparency in ministry can empower survivors, protect congregations, and shift public trust in meaningful ways. Accountability mechanisms, when taken seriously, do not weaken leaders, but preserve their integrity and protect the very communities they serve. Public figures, particularly those who build careers on faith-based platforms, face profound personal costs when private tensions spill into public view. Yet these moments also offer opportunities for growth, honesty, and communal healing. Fans, for their part, are caught in the middle, demanding honesty while also struggling with the equally Christian call to forgiveness. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is that healing must take precedence over image, that gospel communities, if they are to remain credible, must choose authenticity over polish, grace over denial, and courage over silence. This episode, born out of one woman's decision to speak at 42, has already left its mark on the gospel world. It forced hidden tensions into the open, challenged carefully managed reputations, and sparked conversations that will shape the industry for years to come. Whether it ultimately leads to greater transparency or deeper entrenchment remains to be seen, but its impact is undeniable. The gospel community has been reminded that faith is not about perfection, but about the courage to confront imperfection with honesty. And as readers reflect on this story, one invitation remains. Continue engaging with these conversations. Share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories that matter.